Imagine a land that was never meant to be, an entire continent stretching from frozen tundra in the north to dense jungles in the south, a place where nature itself seemed ambivalent to human ambition. This is North America, but not as we know it. Deep in the Ice Age, tens of thousands of years ago, human pioneers crossed the land bridges of the Bering Strait, driven by instinct, hunger, and the unrelenting push of survival. Yet, what if these first waves were not destined to settle, but instead became part of an experiment written in the code of the planet itself? Evidence flickers in bones, in extinct megafauna, and in the silent echoes of frozen valleys. Some waves of humanity vanished, leaving only traces of failed survival, like a warning etched into the landscape. Picture the mammoths, giant sloths, and saber-toothed cats, not just as prey, but as gatekeepers of a continent that resisted permanent occupation. These creatures shaped human instinct, forcing early humans to adapt or disappear, and those who lingered faced a brutal calculus: hunger, cold, predators, disease, a relentless triad that eliminated the weak, the slow, the indecisive. And so a silent selection began, invisible to history but etched into our DNA, shaping risk-taking, curiosity, and the courage to expand or retreat. The survivors carried stories, skills, and adaptations, but the continent itself remained indifferent, almost as if nature had designed a test that no human fully passed. Over millennia, ice sheets advanced and retreated, carving rivers, valleys, and plains, and with each shift, a wave of humans was either crushed or forced to flee, leaving behind tools, fire pits, and bones that would one day puzzle archaeologists. What if the modern American psyche, its obsession with expansion, risk, and conquest, is a distant echo of those trials? The need to push forward, to cross the unknown, to dominate both land and resources, might not be cultural but evolutionary, a survival imprint left from Ice Age bottlenecks. And yet, despite these challenges, the continent eventually birthed civilizations, but always on the edge, always in a dance with risk. Some regions were never fully tamed. Forests swallowed villages, rivers erased paths, and deserts consumed cities that never fully materialized. This tension between human ambition and environmental resistance created a paradox. America could be settled, but never without struggle, a place that simultaneously encouraged ingenuity and punished failure. As the centuries passed, migrations from the east and later the west tried again, building societies, cities, and nations, but the ghosts of failed migrations lingered in the extinction of species, the sudden collapse of cultures, and the stories of lost peoples. Even in the modern era, archaeologists and anthropologists encounter these puzzles: settlements abandoned abruptly, artifacts left in the open, tools unused, evidence of humans who arrived, tried, and disappeared. Every frozen valley, every hidden canyon, every forgotten riverbend holds a fragment of this silent experiment, a chronicle of failure that became the backdrop for eventual success. And when European explorers arrived thousands of years later, they encountered a land that had already tested humanity's limits, a continent preconditioned to shape, challenge, and redefine those who tried to inhabit it. What if beneath the familiar landscape of cities, highways, and farmlands, the land itself carries the memory of countless waves of humans who never survived? What if America's story is not just about discovery, colonization, and civilization, but also about repeated, often invisible failure, an ongoing experiment where success is measured not only in conquest, but in the very survival of those who dared to step foot on its soil? This is a continent that tests humanity at every turn, from icy northern tundras to arid deserts, from towering mountain ranges to endless forests, and through it all, life adapts, dies, and leaves behind subtle clues of what once was. From the frozen rivers of Alaska to the burning plains of Texas, Each biome has been both a cradle and a crucible, shaping the instincts, tools, and strategies of survival. Every blade of grass, every fallen tree, every meandering river carries a story of risk, trial, and adaptation, quietly reminding us that survival is never guaranteed, and that the human story is intertwined with the whims of a land that demands constant respect, ingenuity, and resilience. And so, in contemplating the vastness of America, one is forced to ask, what if this continent was never meant to be fully tamed? What if its very design was a test, a proving ground for intelligence, courage, and adaptability? And what if through all this struggle and repeated failure, we inherited not just the land, but the memory of trials so ancient that they still echo in our instincts today? The story of America is therefore not just a story of triumph, but of survival shaped by failure, a silent, ongoing experiment in which humans are both the subjects and the witnesses, constantly tested by a continent that refuses to yield without a fight. This is a place where nature writes the rules, and humanity learns, adapts, and sometimes falls short, leaving behind a trail of evidence, mystery, and a profound reminder: survival is never given, it is earned, one frozen step, one burned forest, one extinct mammoth at a time. As the Ice Age pressed onward, human migrations into North America faced a landscape that seemed almost hostile by design. Rivers shifted without warning, glaciers swallowed entire valleys, and storms descended like invisible predators. Small bands of humans, sometimes no more than a dozen, traversed these frozen wastes with only sharpened stone, fire, and sheer determination. Yet, time and again, nature intervened. Populations disappeared abruptly, campsites frozen under ice, tools left abandoned on barren plains, evidence of fires extinguished in sudden blizzards. Some groups may have survived by retreating southward, only to encounter swamps, deserts, or predators equally unforgiving. In these trials, human intelligence was tested as much as physical strength. Hunters learned to read snow patterns like maps, to track mammoths not just for food, but for survival, and to predict the subtle signs of approaching predators. Every success, however small, carried enormous risk. A single misstep could mean death, freezing, or starvation. Meanwhile, the megafauna of the continent, mammoths, mastodons, giant beavers, and saber-toothed cats, were not just prey, but co-creators of survival strategies. Humans had to learn timing, stealth, and cooperation at a level unmatched elsewhere. A failed hunt could destroy the fragile equilibrium of a clan, while a successful one could temporarily stave off death, yet never guarantee long-term survival. Over generations, these pressures left indelible marks on human behavior. Groups that survived were exceptionally mobile, highly adaptive, and risk-tolerant. Some anthropologists argue that this constant push against environmental extremes laid the foundation for traits we now recognize as distinctly American: exploration, ambition, and an instinctive attraction to challenges. Even as the Ice Age ended, the remnants of these first trials persisted. The land itself bore the memory of failure, valleys littered with bones of extinct species, abandoned stone tools, and faint traces of early settlements that vanished without a trace. Yet these losses were not without lessons. Knowledge passed down in whispers, gestures, and imitation formed the kernel of cultural evolution. The surviving populations learned the delicate art of resource management, seasonal movement, and intergroup alliances, creating early frameworks for cooperation and conflict resolution that echo in modern societies. Fast forward millennia, when European explorers arrived, they encountered a continent preconditioned by countless cycles of survival and failure. Rivers were unpredictable, forests dense, deserts merciless. But humans had adapted to this uncertainty, giving rise to societies capable of remarkable innovation and resilience. The very geography that challenged early humans, vast plains, towering mountains, arid deserts, shaped settlement patterns, agricultural strategies, and political organization. In some regions, ancient bottlenecks may even explain why certain populations developed risk-oriented behaviors, such as migration, expansion, and exploration, while others settled into predictable routines. This silent shaping continued through every historical epoch: the rise and fall of indigenous civilizations, the arrival of colonists, and the expansion westward across an unforgiving continent. Even the most modern cities are echoes of Ice Age logic. Proximity to water, fertile land, and defensible terrain were all factors first tested by the earliest humans struggling to survive. Today, when Americans cross deserts, climb mountains, or navigate storm-ravaged coasts, they are engaging with a legacy millions of years in the making, a legacy of adaptation, failure, and learning. The land itself is a participant in human development, imposing rules, creating risks, and rewarding ingenuity. And while the story of survival has often been framed as triumphs, it is just as much a story of repeated failure: human waves that never settled, societies that vanished, and species erased from memory. Each of these failures contributed to an invisible laboratory of adaptation, shaping the instincts, behaviors, and strategies of every subsequent generation. By contemplating this hidden history, we begin to understand that America, as a continent, has never been neutral. It is a testing ground, a crucible that continuously challenges human intelligence, endurance, and resilience. Every river crossed, every mountain scaled, and every storm weathered is part of a continuum that began in the Ice Age, linking the first hesitant steps of small hunter-gatherer bands to the modern pursuit of innovation, exploration, and conquest. This is the continent's true secret. Its history is written not just in documents or monuments, but in survival itself, encoded into human behavior, culture, and psychology. And so, when we look across the vast expanse of America today, from bustling cities to untouched wilderness, we are not merely witnessing civilization, we are witnessing the results of an ongoing experiment, one that began with uncertain footsteps on frozen ground and continues to shape who we are, how we think, and what risks we choose to take. The echoes of failure, adaptation, and survival whisper through every forest, desert, and mountain range, reminding us that the story of America is far older and far more intricate than history books can capture. It is a story of endurance, intelligence, and the relentless drive to overcome a land that tests the limits of life itself, a continent that, by design or accident, has forged humanity through trial, error, and the constant interplay between risk and reward. And perhaps in acknowledging this hidden history, we gain more than knowledge. We gain perspective, understanding that survival is never given freely, that failure is as instructive as success, and that the human journey across America is inseparable from the land's own ancient, uncompromising experiment. The continent itself is both stage and teacher, guiding humanity through cycles of challenge and adaptation, leaving behind a legacy not of perfection, but of resilience. And in this understanding, we glimpse the profound truth: America's story is a living laboratory of survival, one that began in the Ice Age, persisted through millennia, and continues to influence the instincts, ambitions, and behaviors of every generation that calls this land home.